welcome once again to another edition of the You Should Get a License podcast edition. Today we have with us someone who has really, worked at all levels, of the insurance industry. Over 40 years, his career has spanned from, being an account executive, an account manager, developing urban markets across different territories. He's been an instructor, for licensing. Uh, he's a board member of the Virginia Insurance Agents Association. He's been a president for the DC chapter for NAIA, the National African American Insurance Association. An esteemed individual, a great human being, family man. When they say the salt of the earth, I think that describes this gentleman, and that's just not my opinion, but everyone who speaks about him, and that is Mr. William Bill Allen. Mr. Allen, pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure to be a part of this conversation. You have the distinction to have me on my first podcast, so I'm a little excited about having the opportunity to have this conversation with you.
We got an exclusive, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely. And when you see the video version of this on our YouTube channel, you'll see that he's very well lit. It's a beautiful background. Just a perfect visual as well. So don't forget to check out the video version once you listen to the audio as well. Mr. Allen, I really want to get started because this is, you should get a license and really encouraging individuals to explore careers in the insurance industry. I want to ask you, about your segment because we talk about the different areas of insurance, and our guests previous to yourself have been in that life and health space, but you're the first guest that we've had that's coming from the P&C world, the property and casualty world. So could you tell us a little bit about your segment of the business and what you did in the insurance space, in the insurance industry?
Okay. Well, my first introduction to the insurance industry was right after a little while after college. I came into the business working. Can I mention the company's name that I work for?
Sure.
Okay. I worked for the Travelers Insurance Company, and I started my career there in the New Orleans area. Started in the underwriting, which was automobile and homeowners, which was all new to me. But as an underwriter, I had the authority to obviously approve applications for car insurance, homeowner insurance, fire insurance, and at the same time, visit with those agents that represented the company. The Travelers is a company that offers a contract to individual business owners. They call them the independent agent. So that's part of the independent agency system, where an agent can represent multiple companies. Travelers is probably one of 3 agents companies, or could be one of 40 companies in an agency. So my role was to work with those agents and increase the Travelers' business opportunities within that agency, meaning how many customers can you send to me on a weekly or monthly basis? How many applications can I get from you? That was my charge, and my charge with those agents to get them to sell the Travelers insurance. So as an account manager, that was my role. That role evolved into more of an agency appointment position. So not only could I work with existing agents, I could actually go out and look for new agents. So one of the first opportunities I had in New Orleans was to actually give an opportunity to an African-American business owner in the New Orleans area who represented other companies, but did not represent the Travelers. So that was sort of the Travelers' introduction into expanding its foothold in the African-American community. There were probably, and I can recall, at least 1, 2, or maybe 3 minority agents in that area that began to represent the Travelers as a part of my involvement. So, and I really enjoyed doing that. That was sort of like, oh, I can go out and look for people who look like me and provide them with an opportunity with a really good standard, A+ rated and good company. And that was one of the things that we look for, is when we look for agents, let them know that Travelers is a superior rated, A-rated, Standard & Poor, AM Best. And these types of companies really give a lot of credence to customers who want to buy insurance. So that was my first introduction, was in the Travelers office. And I could go on with so many different.
Actually, I actually kind of want to stay, in that space for a minute, because, you were saying that really for Black, this is the thing that I don't think many people understand when they think about insurance careers and the opportunities that are prevalent. There was a time, not too long ago, where it was few and far between to see a Black insurance agent.
Exactly.
Right. But particularly one that had, let alone have its own agency, right? One that had reached, that level of success. And what we have now is really a privilege where everyone has the opportunity, to get into the space with a very low barrier to entry. What was the climate like then, even if there was any challenges, even trying to convince an organization like Travelers to say, hey, look, there's viability here with these agents? Or did you have any challenges there?
Okay, that's a very good question. Let me kind of start by saying, but my road started in 1973. So when you look at 1973 and you look at the passage of the Voting Rights Act and Civil Rights Act, it's a very small amount of time. So companies were interested in what we now call diversity. They were interested in doing that. But people who worked for them had no clue as to where to go, and didn't want to go, and in some cases, didn't feel comfortable going. So that made it, that was a sort of a problem for agents who existed in that arena, that there were some companies who employed people who didn't want to go in the Black community or any ethnic community. Then you had the problem of underwriting. The companies learned later on, and redlining was not uncommon. If you've not heard the term, redlining was used by a lot of companies, big or small, to avoid writing business that they considered either older dwellings in urban areas, or people who live in urban areas that own cars and travel in and out of those communities. So redlining was very prevalent. It was almost acceptable for companies to during that time to do that. And it presented challenges for those of us who were coming into the arena to not only find an agent, but then have that agent have the ability to write certain types of business. And the underwriting precluded that, especially when it came to older homes, homes that may not have been updated. And in the urban areas, people were living in homes that were been built back in the early 50s and sometimes the early 40s that may not have been up to code. So these were homes that some Black people or people of color were living in. Wow. So it presented a challenge back then.
So on one hand, you have communities, right, that are deemed, uninsurable, right? But then you have the individuals that work to service those communities, unable to insure them at all, but can't really go into other communities to build their business either. So exactly, you're kind of in a professional limbo.
Right. Now, not to say that in 1973, you had families that were developing a middle class sort of lifestyle.
Right.
So, but then you had some people who were making middle class monies, but lived in older parts of a city or a particular community, and they would suffer because they were paying higher price or not getting a homeowner's policy, but may get a fire policy. So they were getting different products. So if you judge the man based on his income as opposed to where he lived, then that person who was doing well may have lived in an older home, could have been a family home, but couldn't insure it in a standard company.
Wow.
So there was a lot of things happening. Even in the 1973, kids were coming in, we were coming out of college. There were people already out of college who were living who had reasonably good jobs in the New Orleans area that I know of, that were, depending on the economic climate for African Americans during that time, they were making some pretty good money.
Yes.
And lives were changing.
Okay. Yeah. So at that time, there was a progression or progressiveness that was happening in the community, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was a space for those agents, and obviously, the middle class was growing in that time, particularly the Black middle class, growing in that time, which started to create even more and more segments of market space for those agents in those areas. And it seems that that's pretty similar to some of the things that we talk about today with gentrification.
Yes.
And basically, I guess if you have a situation where those property values are difficult to insure, then the property values can go down. People can either lose it, maybe move out, or others can come in, purchase it at a less price.
Yeah.
Drive it up, then it becomes insurable again.
Exactly. So what you have there, back then you had what was called territorial rating. Zip codes were not a factor back then in the whole identifying where people lived.
Mm-hmm.
That was a postal kind of thing. So you have to just like all kinds of different techniques, things that were happening in various arenas, like products. An insurance company would develop a product for the urban area. It was just basic fire, or a dwelling fire policy, or dwelling fire policy 3. There's like 3 different types of fire policies: basic, a broad, and a special. And those policies had very limited coverage. They only covered maybe 5 or 6 perils: windstorm, fire, lightning, those kinds of common kinds of perils. Wow. Then you had a homeowner policy that was a basic, broad, and special form that had multiple perils that they insured. For each policy you purchase perils that cover certain types of losses. So a person who lived in an urban area wasn't buying a homeowners. They were getting a basic fire that had limited coverage and sometimes no liability. Mm-hmm. So it's a very different product in those areas.
That's tough.
So, and the cost was much more. Although you got limited perils, the pricing was still, higher than a regular homeowners. That's just how it was done back then.
Wow.
Now, over time, all that evolved to where we can buy a homeowner policy in an urban area.
Right.
And you only use a dwelling fire policy if you absolutely have to. And that's the only thing that exists. The policy still exists, but it's used very infrequently, but it's used primarily for investors who buy properties that they own, but they may rent to others. Or it may be a property that is older. It meets standard codes, but could be a small home, small frame house. They can still sell a fire policy too. And now it kind of depends on the client has more of an opportunity to choose than they used to.
Yeah, because if they're an investor, then they can get that, and the renter can get the renter's policy for their personal property. And
yeah, but it covered the home for the investor.
Right. Got you. Yeah. So with that, and really, I mean, Mr. Allen, I feel like that portion of the conversation we probably could talk about for an hour, right? but just to stay in line with the theme of this podcast,
Yeah.
let's talk.
But that's more of a historical analogy
Yes.
of how the industry kind of moved and evolved and what took place to make that happen. That's sort of the beginning of another story, is what companies did to make insurance more inclusive. What triggered that? And there was a lot of things happening in a lot of cities around the country. You're New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Richmond, Washington, D.C., Dallas, Houston, where there was a high population of African Americans or people of color, let's say. There were things happening in the background to spur companies to take a more serious look at writing coverage in urban areas. So they were being sued.
Mm.
And companies were being sued for millions of dollars.
Man, and it's like, why do people have to be forced to do the right thing?
That's always been our story.
Right.
And it continues to this day.
When
you think of things that happen, look at what's happening in the political arena to this day.
Like I said, we could continue into. We could just keep going, on this conversation, but
seems like it.
I get it. No, but I want to go back to, before, you got into the insurance industry. I know you say you started your career as an underwriter. What were you doing before you joined Travelers, before you even thought about insurance? What was the first career or job you were working in?
Wow, I probably had a couple, because when I graduated from Xavier University in New Orleans in 1972, my first job was I had a degree in political science and sociology being my major. I worked, believe it or not, for Sears selling shoes.
Okay.
Another college buddy of mine had a job there, and he said, well, if you need some work, I need somebody in my shoe department. So I did that for a little while. That was just kind of making sure that I could pay my rent and put my groceries in the refrigerator, but constantly looking for other opportunities. Then I had another gentleman that I graduated with came to me and said, I've got a job opening with the Kansas City Railroad. They're looking for another clerk. The pay is really good, the benefits are good, but you got to have knowledge of a computer system. I'm like, are you serious? He said, but I can show you what to do that they want you to do. And that's basically was a card reader. Back then, a computer was as big as a room. So he showed me how to do, I forgot what they called it, but it was, you put cards in the machine and you put the data in what the card had to say, the card spit out. And with the Kansas City Railroad, those cards indicated how each car that came along the track was to be dropped off. So he said, we'll put you out, you start off as a brakeman. When the train comes in, you go out, you write down everything that's on the outside of the car. There's a number. That number is associated with what's in the car. So I would bring all that data back in to the clerk's office, and I had to sit down at a typewriter and punch in that information that created a hole in a card. Wow. The card fed into a machine. Wow. And when that train left the yard, it had to be in a certain order, because as it left the city, it dropped off a refrigerated truck or a truck that had corn in it, or a car that had cars in it. So it dropped those things off, and I had to make sure that information was given to the conductor on a printout based on, so that I did that for a little while. Now I got my job with the Travelers because I knew a gentleman who worked for a Total Community Action, was a nonprofit. The guy's first name was Robert. He and I had done some volunteer work together when I was a student. I did some political things for him and a lady who eventually became a councilwoman in New Orleans. Her name was Dorothy May Taylor. So I did a lot of volunteer work when I wasn't working. I did a lot of political kind of things to help her with her campaign. So And it's all about not what you know, but who you know sometimes. So he knew me, and he knew that I played basketball at Xavier. He knew I was student body president at Xavier, that I was politically inclined. I did some volunteer work. I was a hard worker. If he asked me to do something, I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get it done. But he knew that. He knew somebody who was a headhunter. They got a job request from the Travelers. They needed an African American male. African American. I don't think of gender wasn't a deal, but African American was it. And he knew me. So he told the headhunter, I got a guy. I'm gonna have him put together a resume, sit down and talk to him. And that person was me. And I went to the headhunter. He helped me kind of work with my resume a little bit better. And that's how I got the job at Travelers.
Wow.
40 years.
40 years. Congratulations.
One company.
Literally unheard of today. Just amazing.
Heard of, yes.
Amazing.
Yes, but again, and we can get into that later on, but it was never just one job.
Right.
It was one company with multiple opportunities that
Absolutely.
really kept me involved and
Right.
kept me in a position where I was learning more about the industry, more about the people in the industry.
Yeah.
This is an industry that needs us. I'm convinced.
Yes.
And people need to understand, and our community needs education on the value of insurance, just like they know the value of investing their money or buying a home or even finding the right doctor. Insurance is valuable information.
Absolutely.
And people need to know why and how to purchase it. Most people, and we all learn, and you know, they buy based on price.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can preach on that.
Yeah.
In the absence of price, what is the next thing you look for? Is value.
That's it.
And so we want our agents to sell on the principle of value. So when they sit down with a customer, I would always tell them, make sure your customer understands what they got to protect.
That's right.
They got a lifestyle first, Yeah. They have cars, they have homes, they have investments, first of all, they got a wage. Your insurance protects all your assets, and you pick your limits of insurance based on what you want to protect first.
Right.
Your limits of liability on your car, you value your home, the liability that you carry on your homeowner policy.
That's right.
If you carry an umbrella policy, all of that's designed to protect your wealth. So I would try to encourage agents, talk to a customer about what they have to lose. If a customer says, I don't own a home, I don't have but one car, I don't have a whole lot of money, but you got a wage.
That's it. That's it. It's
how much
price,
do you make?
it's price versus cost, right?
Yes.
What is this?
And what you have to lose?
Not to have.
And it's always about what's your responsibility if you injure someone, or you the worst thing you can do is kill a breadwinner.
Yeah.
In someone's home by your actions in the car. Or I tell people to this day, when you invite people to the park to play soccer with you, and it's your invitation, and they hurt themselves, that's on you.
It's on you.
So you invited them there. If you didn't go out and scout the area and make sure there was no rocks or glass or things that injure a person, they could say that's part of your negligence. You should have scouted that area. You should have picked a better area. You can be sued for almost anything these days.
Yes.
And so when you purchase your insurance products, our people, all people in particular, need to know why. And then you determine what's important to me in terms of what I can pay for, but what I'm gonna get best to protect me and my family and the way I live.
That's right.
Because people don't hear the the sad stories.
That's right. But yeah, you see nowadays, working in the life and health space, we talk about the GoFundMe's, that are out there, for
Yeah,
when folks are just, unprepared, for these
right.
things to happen. And it can devastate a family as opposed to, having an asset in place that's going to help you sustain, or grow generation after generation. You have something, you're in a situation where you're being depleted generation by generation by generation, because you're always staying at a deficit, so to
Yes.
speak. So I get it. I mean, it's definitely valuable, and I hope with these types of platforms, what it really does is it allows people to see the amount of contribution and impact that they can make in their own communities,
Right.
by pursuing, a career, in the insurance industry, by getting into the space.
Hmm.
Um, growing up, your childhood, I know you were one of eight
Yes.
siblings. Okay.
Second oldest of eight.
Second oldest of eight siblings. Um, what did you want to be when you grow up? Like what did Bill Allen want to do when he got older? I know it wasn't insurance. So what did you want to do?
No, anyone who's in insurance never thought they would be in insurance.
Right.
Uh, you know, probably basketball. That was the one that I played basketball from the time I was in the eighth grade. I was always tall and lanky.
Mm-hmm.
So I played basketball starting in the seventh grade in a parochial Catholic school, playing in the parochial Catholic school athletic system. It was just like on every Saturday, they would get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and go play basketball at some other Catholic school gym. And that was my introduction to basketball, and playing basketball in school and then on the courts in the hood where I grew up, the neighborhood. You play outdoors constantly. So I always felt like, and I played high school basketball and other sports. But from a career standpoint, I kind of felt like, well, I wanted to go to college when I got to my senior year in high school, and look at the business opportunity. I would have probably gone in and been took an academic career in business. It was something that you just kind of think you're going to do.
Okay.
Until I got the opportunity to get a scholarship to go to Xavier University to play basketball. And so I said, wow. So I go there. It's a good school. They have a good science program.
Yes.
I like science. I want to be a biology teacher.
Okay.
Well, when you walk on a campus and you tell a student or your peer dean, they give you somebody to work with you, I want to be a biology teacher. Well, they think you like, oh, you're a scientist. You're gonna fit right into this school. But they don't tell you there's no such thing as a biology program to be a teacher. You have to do teaching and biology. It's two separate things.
Right.
It's not one. So I was just naive about that.
Gotcha.
I said, well, I'll do something else.
If not biology, I'll go into insurance.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I was more suited for working with people and understanding the dynamics of people. So I got a degree in sociology, which actually I used, believe it or not, as a sociology major and a political science minor. You have to engage yourself with people and understand how people function, how communities work, how statistics and all of that. So you learn all of that in the sociology environment, and I really liked it. I'm like, God, this is great. So I feel like I can use this. And then when I started volunteering and doing things in the community and helping people, and then when I got the job in the insurance industry, that was, quote, helping people. It was more it was more abstract in that sense. I'm dealing with a product, but I'm making it possible for people when I get an application. I'm trying to think if they asked you what your race was. No, you couldn't do that. So you can only guess where people live based on their address, whatever, if you had to. But the main thing was I was helping all people by being able to determine if they were uh, um, eligible for coverage with the travelers insurance company. But that's kind of my start. But I had no idea I was going to be in insurance. If you ask most people today, they had no idea they get into it.
Right, kind of lucked into it in most cases,
Yeah.
So I'll ask you, I don't know, you might get this question often. Okay, this might be the question of the decade here. LeBron or Jordan?
Oh, Jordan.
Jordan. I'm gonna go with Jordan too. I'm gonna go with Jordan too, just based on sheer legacy alone.
Yes. Yeah, and what you understand about this young man's work ethic, God, if all of us had just a piece of that,
yeah,
to me, I think for any young man and young children, like I had two boys, and my oldest had a Michael Jordan poster in his room that was the wingspan. It was 6 feet long of Michael Jordan, and he still has it to this day.
Wow.
And it was just his work ethic that I think I thought he was just phenomenal with that.
Yeah. No, I would agree, especially for today.
Mm-hmm.
5 years from now, how long do you think LeBron got left? He got a good 5 years, right?
Well, he's in his 30s. Well, he's 35, 36. So he probably has another 2 or 3 years. But I see more in his development as a man in our community.
I agree.
He's already setting the stage to be more. He's more community aware and active. He's more political.
Yes.
Than Michael Jordan was more of an example of what an athlete should be. And he led within that arena with his teammates, the teamwork. So his mindset was to me a lot different than LeBron. Mm-hmm. LeBron is a man of the millennium.
Yeah.
The millennium, I should say.
Yes.
He's more in tune with what is happening around us, which is great, because we need that more now than I ever thought at this point we would need. And the more LeBrons we have, the more we are able to push forward our place in this society.
Absolutely. 100.
So I see them as two different men, and each have a different ethic.
Yes, I think it's interesting because and I'm gonna bring that back to the insurance part of the conversation, but it's interesting because you see one and like you said, hey, this is the example of the prototype for what a dedicated athlete really should be, right? That high level of discipline, focus, team, the ability to motivate the team members and support the team members. Then you see someone who is an extremely high caliber athlete as well, like extremely
right, exactly. I don't take anything away from LeBron. No,
right.
He has those same qualities.
But the example of a man who is really socially conscious and responsible about his family, respectable, really engaging and wanting to do big things for the community, and a true example of Black excellence from a philanthropic standpoint.
Right? I think that's the evolution of we as Black people and Black men and women. That's that evolution. We've all learned, I think, to work together. Mm-hmm. Because when I was growing up, there was this old adage about the crabs in a bucket mentality.
Yes.
I think we've moved past some of that, and I think that I'm impressed by the amount of teamwork that I see, the expressions of young people now. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds a little bit of the 60s and the 70s.
Yes.
And the foundations have been laid, the groundwork has been broken, and I see the mantle being passed on. It's constant. It's an evolving process for us,
Passion
even
is
in this
high.
industry. It's an evolving process in any industry, in particular the insurance, because it's primarily a white male dominated environment.
Yeah, I wanted to. That's why I wanted to kind of bring that into
Mhm.
the moles of, hey, what things maybe were represented by versus what they're what they're representative of now. We've seen that similar progression in the insurance space as well. And I think, do you feel like it's been a matter of just for the insurance industry? Do you think it's been a matter of just increased character development, exposure, and opportunities that have created this wave? I'm seeing like a wave of more of us, more Black professionals, emerging in the space, particularly at higher level and executive levels now. Do you think that's been a matter of the development? Do you think it's more of a matter of just the social climate that we're in right now? What would you attribute, that to at this stage? Because it's a great time for us to join the
Yeah.
industry, without a doubt.
Well, I would like to. A lot of that started before what we can see as a social movement now. I think companies were aware of the uh, opportunities to market to people of color. As people of color, not only African American community, but the Hispanic, the Asian American,
Yes.
Arab, the LGBTQ community are becoming more political and more economically sustainable. They have great influences on the decision making. So long before what you're seeing now was already beginning to happen,
In play.
it was imperative that companies market to these communities that are growing. When you look at the African American community growing, it has grown exponentially in the last 65 years since the Civil Rights Bill. I'm 70 years old.
Wow.
And so when I look at what happened in the past to now, that's a very short period of time. And we've done extremely well as as people of color in this country. So businesses you see that they take advantage of it. So yeah, we're seeing more. Now, on the flip side of that is the economic opportunities for the agent, whether you're a life agent or a property and casualty agent. But in the property and casualty field, as an agent wanting to sell insurance to a large commercial business, it's difficult because a lot of those larger institutions, your hotels, your banks, your institutions of higher learning, all those buildings and opportunities are still owned by white people.
Right.
Now, there are Black people inside those institutions, those businesses that can have an impact and a role on whether or not a Black agent can service a commercial business. And that's happening.
Absolutely. Yes, it is. Absolutely.
Okay, so that's why our role as becoming a part of this business is important, because that means that an agent who's needing to make a living can now represent these same companies, provide the same service, but what's needed is that opportunity. And so by having us enmeshed in all these various types of industries, whether it's the oil industry, the hotel industry, the entertainment industry, all those industries, people can make decisions on who writes the insurance. And that's the key to the economic development for African American businesses who are taking on the mantle of providing property and casualty insurance, because we don't have any Hiltons or the Marriotts.
Right.
Or these big buildings with these names on them, or these industries that are managed and run by and owned by, the Standard Oils, all those things. That's been around for eons.
Yes.
But so there's an evolution of the mindset of businesses, and the people inside of those businesses. That's been key, and you want to maintain that. We want to maintain that the people, white people, that are, I guess they use the term woke. You know,
Okay.
they've been awakening. So
Yeah.
I think for the most part, they're going to be woke going forward.
Yes.
And that's going to be very helpful for us in this industry. And then as young people come up and they begin to create businesses, create contract opportunities to provide services for and build their own entrepreneurial opportunities, it's going to just push our opportunities further.
Absolutely.
You know, for people of color.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That makes sense.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I think that's a very well-rounded, perspective, and extremely accurate, especially considering, you were there, in 73, really creating opportunities for the first few Black travelers agents to see where, things have gone now. I want to, kind of transition. So at what point did you move from New Orleans, which is a great city, by the way? I'm vegan, but I had some king cake in New Orleans. But it was vegan king cake, and it was delicious. And I did find the baby in there, right? And I also
the next party.
I owe somebody else a king cake now for that. But at what point did you move from New Orleans to the East Coast?
Okay, well, I had an opportunity to move from when I was in New Orleans. I left Travelers after 13 years and went to work for a independent minority-owned agency that I gave a contract to. This gentleman he represented 7 or 8 really big companies: the Aetna at the time, the Safecos, the Hartfords, some mutual companies, and the Travelers. And so I worked for him as an agent selling small commercial packages. Or at the time, you actually had to put the package together because they didn't have the package policies that they have now, the business owner policies. So we would have to. I did that for a while. But the thing that got me back to the Travelers was automation. It was a time when companies were beginning to interface using computer technology. It was very, very rudimentary. It was all done on floppy disks. What made it for me to move into that realm was that I could type on a typewriter. I sat down at a computer with a floppy disk, and an application pulls up, which is, put your name, address, whatever, and it prints out on a piece of paper. So I could type. So I could actually input data into the computer and spit it out in a printed form and save it on a disk. Well, they thought that was miraculous.
Wow.
It was like, you could do it. You know how to work with a computer? No, I just know how to type. But it gave me an entree for that office being the automation specialist. So when the computers came to the office, I was trained on how to set up the computer, how to make sure the floppy disks were in, and if there were any problems, I could fix them. And so I was trained on as an automation specialist. I would fly up to Hartford, Connecticut, spend days working with those people who were developing this new technology on the front end to deliver to the offices, which began to take the place of the fax machines, more or less, because things are being able to be transmitted.
My 19-year-old's listening to this like, what's a fax machine?
Yeah. So being an automation specialist, I came back to the Travelers in that role after being an agent, and I went to Houston, and I handled the state of Louisiana, all of Houston, and parts of East Texas up to Dallas. And I traveled those areas working with agents, implementing the new travelers, they called it interface technology with agents. That was my job that and I loved that job because I could travel. I flew on an airplane up and down the east, between New Orleans and Hartford, Connecticut, all the time, attending conferences to learn more about the interface and creating the standards. So all those standards that you see now, used with technology, all was created during that time. And I was a part of that. And so that role got me into Richmond, Virginia. I was in Dallas, actually Houston, in the field office, and they said, we're going to be changing this role here, but we can offer you opportunities in Pittsburgh, Richmond, or Orlando. Well, I knew Pittsburgh was going to be too cold. I wasn't ready for that kind of weather. My wife grew up in New Orleans. She said, if I can get away from the hot weather, I don't want to go to Orlando. I said, well, we go in the middle. We go to Richmond.
Richmond is right there, right in the middle.
Right there. So, and that's how we got to Richmond, and which is great because we had all the 4 seasons. She loved the weather. We were there for 27 years. My wife's an educator, so she got a job in the education system. She became, before she retired, a vice principal of an elementary school. Our 2 sons went to school in Virginia after leaving Houston until they went to college. My oldest went back to New Orleans, Xavier, and my youngest graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University right there in Richmond.
Awesome. Okay.
And I was there for 27 years until I moved to Maryland to be closer to my 2 sons. One lives in Maryland, one lives in DC, and we have 2 grandkids.
Awesome. Congratulations, on the grandchildren, as well.
Yeah. The thing that, that one little thing can happen that changes your whole dynamic. Yes. Me taking that typing class in high school to be around the young ladies who were taking typing gave me a whole new career.
Isn't that something? How all of our experiences really over the course of our life kind of prepare us for the scenarios that we end up in.
Yes.
You just never know where the road is going to lead. It's such a divine plan.
Yes.
I want to speak a little bit about your charitable contributions, and how you talked about volunteering early in your career, and kind of transitioning into NAIA and independent insurance agents. How did you start to get involved in those in the industry organizations and become not just involved but really a valuable just a contributor to those organizations?
Well, I was still working for the Travelers Insurance Company. The Travelers Insurance Company was very committed to inclusion and diversity as a company. So they actually created an operation that there were 4 African-American males. We ran the diversity, we were all diversity managers in a diversity marketplace group. Our role was to create opportunities for the company to attract agents around the country and to make sure those agents were trained properly. So we worked with a gentleman who developed a training program for incoming and existing agents on how to actually build a business plan, how to run an agency for the most part. So when that happened, that gave us exposure to community organizations who were rehabbing homes in urban areas where we would go out and look for agents. We also partnered with community groups. That partnership through community groups allowed us to be on the front end of rehabilitation of older homes. So we had what was called an urban markets approach to making sure properties were available for our agents and getting them involved in working with those community groups, providing homeowner insurance classes for those people who were buying their home for the first time. And that program still exists to this day in a lot of communities. That's why you see the home buyer credit now is on your tax return. So if you're a new home buyer, you get a home buyer, if you take a class, you get that home buyer credit on your taxes, as well as with a reduced interest rate on your purchase on your loan through a bank.
Yes.
So those programs still existed. So we were doing all of that when NIA was created in 1987. Gerald Tillman, who was the founder, got to know all of the marketing reps who were out in the communities working through these companies, and his desire to create that kind of organization. He started in Ohio, Cincinnati. He had a small group of agents there called the African American Insurance Group or something. And so he started just reaching out as he learned about people and other agents in various parts of the country. He would share this idea with. And I can remember being a part of that first initial meeting, along with my compadres. Companies were interested in what he was talking about, so they would send. There was people from the Erie, from the Hartford, from the Travelers. We all kind of descended around the Gerald and his meeting. I remember going to Tampa for a meeting at the company expense, just to learn what this guy was doing, and they wanted to make sure we were a part of that. So as the organization developed, I've been a part of NIA since 1987.
Wow.
And we started doing workshops and inviting our company people and around the country to join. We would go out to our companies, to the various locations. We would talk about NIA to get our African American brothers and sisters to be a part of it. If there was a chapter developing in their area, we'll go out and talk to them. So the company really made it easy for us to become engaged. And of course, once you start doing that, people kind of know who you are, whether you're with a company or a state association. And we partnered with the Big I. We were part of the Big I created a diversity program within its organization, and we would be a part of they would have a luncheon every year to recognize diversity and people of color. So I got to know the people in the Big I, and then living in the state of Virginia, they reached out looking for a board member. I said, I'll be a board member, and so that was helpful because then it helped build educational programs in and around Richmond, the state of Virginia. And so that's how I got to do property and casualty teaching, because part of their arm was teaching property and casualty insurance for agents and their staff. And they also would do teaching for licensing purposes, both property and casualty and life insurance and health. So those things enabled the individuals to get licensed. So that's kind of how I got into doing that. And I was always involved in going to high schools through the Invest. The Big I had an Invest program for kids, where you go out and you talk about insurance, how insurance works, and being part of that process. So I've been involved in this business from beginning to the end on a lot of levels.
So how important do you feel it would be for a new agent, because this is called You Should Get a License, right? But it's not just getting the license, it's what you do with it after you have it, and how you use the opportunity.
Yeah.
How important do you feel it is for agents or other professionals to get involved in the various agents associations or trade organizations that are out there?
I tell you what, I think it's very important, because although when you walk into a room, even to this day, you might be one of maybe 6 or 7 persons of color. But I think it's very important, because these organizations need to know and understand how you think. We all don't think the same. We're not a monolithic group of people. as people of color are. People sometimes they think we all want to do the same kinds of things, but it's not. It's important to be a part of those organizations and develop your leadership, develop your knowledge of the business, and that is political too. And the legislation that comes out of states and out of the federal government that impacts the way you do business. So I think it's important from that standpoint that we understand that process and help develop leadership and get to know people who don't look like us, because they're the ones who kind of make things happen. And they look forward to the opportunity to sit down and understand how you run your business or what they can share with you. And you can learn a lot just from sitting across a table or even playing golf on the golf course. Deals are made. You can participate. If they're looking for a minority agent to participate in a deal with a business or a government-run opportunity, they need minority participation. So I think it's very important that people of color become part of an association, whether it's of their own or with the majority. And you can be part of both.
Absolutely.
And there's no exclusion for them to be a part of minority organizations. There's no exclusions at all. So we have, if you look at NIA, I don't know if there's any quote members, but there are member companies that contribute to that organization, and their folks come out to meetings and they know of the organization. So I think it gives you a wide range of opportunities and connections. Again, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Right. About relationship. And this is a relationship-driven business.
It is.
It is, right?
Oh, I tell you about that. You got to be able to communicate and relate to people. You may not like, the person you're sitting next to, but you can do business with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if you trust them, obviously.
Yeah.
But it is a relationship. Even with your clients, it's a relationship. Your client needs to know that you think about them.
Absolutely.
If you're gonna keep them, they like to know that you're thinking about them. You send them something, you calling them, you're asking about doing a review.
Yes.
That's all those elements of just staying in touch is critical to this business.
That's right. And that's how massive success is accomplished. And you
yes, I believe it.
End up having an extensive 40-year career in different environments, doing different things and really excelling, being at the top of your game. When I think of you, Mr. Allen, I think of someone who's kind of reached the pinnacle in their field, has really had kind of getting to the top and really touched and impacted people along the way at substantial levels. So before I even say anything else and before we close out, thank you for your contributions, and not just being here, but just thank you to your contributions to the industry as a whole, and really kind of paving the way even for people like myself to be seen as viable in this business. So I appreciate you for that.
Yes, and I appreciate you being a part of this business, because you have a lot to contribute. I can see that, and you're a go-getter. I don't think you stood around for too long. You like to make things happen. So I appreciate that.
I mean, that's what we're here to do, right? We got to leave it better than we found it, right? So
no doubt.
Before we close out, you're doing some consulting now. You're doing consulting, for individuals who are starting agencies. Can you speak just a little bit to that?
I work with a gentleman out of Erie, Pennsylvania. He has an organization called the National Association of Insurance Professionals, and he and I do licensing training in property and casualty. And so what he does is he works within different states and looking at a lot of the associations, and they're looking for people. Like I was saying, there is a need, because this in our industry, we're getting older. So the agent ranks are shrinking because people are retiring and what have you. So his main role is, and I'm one of probably 2 or 3 instructors that he'll call on to do a class or to work with. He goes out and he basically works with states through their apprenticeship programs. If they're looking to license, get a part of their process is certifying people in certain job roles. Then he'll get a opportunity with them to put together a class, and they will pay him and the students to attend, and I'll do that.
Awesome. Awesome.
So
So
I've been
offering,
doing it for a while.
offering, that knowledge and experience to someone
Yes.
else, giving them some applications and situations that they can take into their career. 40-year career, still going, even teaching now. What keeps you motivated now to continue? I mean, you don't have to.
You know what? I kind of felt like I really fell in love with this industry. I used the word I had a calling. When I realized that I could again help people and help people of color. And my involvement was not only limited to African Americans, it was women, agents with disabilities, the LGBT community, the Arab community, Hispanic community, and the Asian American. I touched all those various communities. In this role that I had, I would actively go out and seek opportunities for agents like this with the travelers. So I enjoyed that. I got to culturally meet a lot of different people. So I kind of felt like, I'm Catholic by religion. So, when a priest or a nun or somebody said they had a calling to represent, Jesus Christ, well, I represented the travelers. That was my calling.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And to this day, I still do. If I'm called upon to talk with somebody about insurance or go into a classroom, I'll do it.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's the fire that keeps it going. For somebody who's listening, if they're thinking, they're kind of on the fence of whether they want to get into this industry or not, what would you say to that person?
Well, it is a lifelong educational process. You just can't, to me, you just can't get into it as particularly as an agent and not fully comprehend the nature of the product. And there are a lot of myths in the world of people, of the consumer, about how insurance works.
Yes.
So I think anybody who wants to get into it has to be one that really wants to develop it and learn the details. Learn about new products, new changes in the language.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lifelong learning process. And your role as an agent is, to me, not any different than an attorney or a doctor, because what you prescribe to your client can make a difference in the way they will continue their lifestyle and preserve and manage their wealth.
That's right.
And that's what it's all about. And people need to see your role as being that important.
That's right. Hey, so anybody listening, the expertise is needed. You have to cultivate that expertise.
Yes, it's needed.
That expertise is needed, for your community, whoever you are. It's needed for your community, is for you to be able to make that impact. And I'll tell you, like I said, Mr. Allen, you've made a tremendous impact. I want to say thank you, for taking the time today, and in our conversations offline as well, as a inspiration, and as you may not even know it, but even as a mentor, and look, I don't know how much you want to share. If you want people to get in contact with you, I definitely want to open it up. If you want to, share any contact information, or if there's any way that you want people to be able to get in contact with you currently, whether they want to take classes, anything you want to share with the public before we close out.
Okay. Well, at this point, there are no classes that are going on. Now, if any individual is looking to want to be a licensed agent, you can always contact your state Big I Association. It's the Independent Insurance Agents and Brokers. There's a organization in every state that will provide the licensing and the training needed. My training is specific to certain kinds of opportunities for people, but the state associations are very good providers of your ability to get a license. And there are also a lot of online licensing courses that you can take and get a license as well. But it's always good to get in front of somebody who can answer questions and give you a more of a reality check when it comes to understanding how insurance works.
That's right, and bounce things off of. And
Yes.
bounce things off of. So definitely, you know, you mentioned the Big I, the IAB, and also, you know,
PIA.
II, Independent Agents and
And
Brokers of America.
Yes.
Okay.
Independent Agents and Brokers of America and the
And-
Professional Insurance Association also does training.
Professional Insurance Association, and NIA as well. You know, National American Insurance Association. These
Yes.
are, you know, organizations that you can lean on and look to for support.
Oh,
guidance.
definitely. Good contact.
Good contacts as well. I'll make sure that I'll put some links, you know, in the video portion of this as well. Look, thank you all, you know, for listening. Once again, thank you, Mr. Allen, for being here, sharing your wisdom and knowledge. This has been an incredibly educational conversation. I know for the
Thank you.
listeners, definitely for me as well. You're always a wealth of knowledge. Like I told you offline, you always leave me better than you found me. So thank you for your time today. And thank you for listening. And maybe you heard something that made you think, you should get a license. Until next time, take care.